Good morning, Dr. Fuller. You're looking awfully dapper. I need another word. Dapper's just too pedantic for you.
Well, and I do appreciate that and the pedantism. So thank you very much for both.
Yeah, I do what I can.
I,
Uh,
like I told you the other day, I went into a doctor's appointment, and the lady behind the counter told me I was dressed dapperly, and then I went in and I talked to the MD, and he's a very stoic MD. Like he never looks at you. I think he's on the spectrum personally. He's a surgeon, and he said the same thing. You look very dapper, and I said, well, I figured if you're going to tell me I have a terminal disease, I want to be properly dressed. I was inspired by recall the French advisor in what was that Mel Gibson movie where he's another one where he's killing Brits. They were fighting in the Revolutionary War, the beginning of the Revolutionary, the Patriot.
Yes, the Patriot.
The Frenchman goes out to the big, ultimate battle at the end there, and he says, "If I'm going to die, at least I'll be well dressed." That's kind of my attitude.
No, I think it's a great idea. Oh, Alan Kelly is on from occupied Virginia. Alan is coin number 1571. If you want to find out if becoming a coin member of our community is the right decision for you and your kinfolk, please click the links in today's show notes. If you want to pick up a copy of your old pal Rich Brown's book on violence and varietals, are still out there. Pick them up anywhere you get books, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. I mean, hell, we're all over the place. Or you can just go to therichbrown.com and pick up a signed copy as well.
Not to be confused with arichbrown.com.
No. I am the Rich Brown. There are many like it, but I am yours. Dr. Fuller, where could people pick up one of your 3 books, sir?
Well, the easy one, of course, is Amazon. That's the low-lying fruit. Or you can go to tcfuller.com and follow the links from there. And, of course, anybody that's a member of the American Warrior Society that wants to get a signed copy can just get in touch with me this way, and I'll be happy to hook them up.
Yeah, so we got Alan on. Will Rhodes is on from Missouri. Tony is on. Good morning, folks. Guile is on from the Philippines. Says, missed you all. You have been missed as well, sir. Johnny King is on from the Bluegrass State. I should say the Commonwealth of the Bluegrass. And Dr. Fuller and I are both Kentucky colonels there.
We are. I largely have you to thank for that, sir.
Do what I can. It's ultimately up to the governor, but I just wrote a very well worded, if I may say so myself.
Glowing, one might say.
Yes. I've got a lot of stuff to talk to you about. I know we only got 1 hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get cracking, man. Have you seen the news this morning of it's the base commander up at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin? It's like the first female Hispanic colonel to ever be a base commander there or something like that. She allegedly refuses to hang up Donald Trump or Secretary Hegseth's photos. Everybody, of course, is calling for her head. I don't know if I haven't seen whether she intentionally and willfully chose not to do it, or she's just waiting for the base Photoshop to get her photographs. But I don't know.
Yeah, when I was in the military, McCoy was a National Guard installation. It's used for northern training largely. So I imagine she's is she an active duty soldier?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean that seems like pretty low hanging fruit. I mean, you're going to get clobbered for that. I mean, if that's the hill you want to die on, go right ahead. But at the end of the day, it's someone's going to give you a lawful order to hang that, and you're going to either do it or you're not. We've seen people die on weirder hills than that. That seems like a very odd one to throw your career out the window on.
Well, the female colonel in Greenland just got smoked for very similar, although much more egregious in some ways. Saying that not gonna comply with.
Yeah, and I mean, throughout your career and mine, because they're largely contemporaneous, we saw people that just screwed up and got crushed. There was remember that Air Force general that got crushed because he did something he was in Europe, I think, and he ran his mouth about POTUS in a public.
Oh yeah.
Remember that guy? And
that was not McRaven, but they wrote a book about it, The Operators.
Did he? Yeah, but I mean, it was at the end of the day. You join the military. Those of us that have been in the military know you lose some of your constitutional rights. One of them is your freedom of speech is severely curtailed. And I've joked on the show before. It's a joke I tell people all the time. The best part about being retired is I got my First Amendment back.
That's right.
Now I can say what I like with very little fear of repercussion, unless I say it to my wife. So you take the king's coin, you play by the king's rules, is really the way it rolls. So you don't like the president of the United States while you're serving. Well, wait a minute, it's going to change. Mm-hmm. You and I both served under presidents that we liked and disliked. I imagine that's true of everyone here. I'm sure that Alan Kelly served under governors when he was a state trooper that he liked, and I'm sure he served under governors that he didn't like. I've known Secret Service guys on details that hated the POTUS they were protecting, and I know ones that loved the POTUS they were protecting. You don't like him, you don't like him. The difference is you got to shut the hell up about it.
No, 100%. Speaking of colonels, good morning, Rudy. Good to see you, sir. Gregory is on. Good morning, gentlemen. Please like, share, and comment. Love to get your thoughts on it, especially, Rudy as being a retired Air Force colonel. We were just discussing Rudy, the female colonel up in Fort McCoy, the base commander, who essentially appears to be refusing to post the command board photos from POTUS, being Donald Trump and Secretary Hegseth. Not a career enhancer for sure. And the general we were speaking of is Stan McChrystal.
Was it McChrystal?
He's the one that ran his mouth. There was a volcano in Iceland. They got grounded. They couldn't fly, and they were boozing up with a Rolling Stone reporter. And
you remember which POTUS it was that he ran his mouth about?
I was Obama. Obama fired him.
Obama, yeah.
Brought him in and smoked him.
Yeah, and look, whether I agree with what he had to say or not, you don't get to say it while you're in uniform, pal. You just don't. And Rudy, I'm sure, has had those experiences where he's worked for people he liked and didn't like, and he's probably had very strong opinions about some of them. And I'm sure the reason that he made colonel and didn't get thrown out as a captain is because he didn't, screw it up.
Yeah, absolutely. An interesting footnote about Fort McCoy. When I first joined the Marine Corps, my infantry battalion was the cold weather battalion. And all the guys there had their Arctic service ribbon. And it was, a matter of fact, I was in Arctic squad leader school. Scratch that. I was training to go to Arctic squad leader school when Saddam invaded Kuwait. But that's what we did. And to a man, the guys that did the whole Arctic package said the coldest part of the whole thing was Fort McCoy. Like, that is no joke.
Well, and you guys do some of that training out in California, right? Up in the high desert there.
Oh, yeah. Bridgeport. But again, Bridgeport, Norway, everywhere they went paled in the comparison to Fort McCoy. That's what they said.
I believe it. Well, I mean, it's not like there's any mountains blocking the wind between you and the North Pole.
No.
It just comes whistling down there, and Wisconsin's so moist. The winters up there are just brutal.
Yeah. Will, our good friend Will Wood would know about that. He's up in Wisconsin. But we got Joseph on. Good morning. He's up in Vermont, speaking of cold places. Yeah. Johnny King says she will be promoted to full turret colonel. Yeah.
She might get transferred to Camp Couch here real quick, sent off to Fort Living Room.
But that's the way it should be, right? I mean, I remember the Marine Corps Gazette when President Clinton got elected, there was a Marine Corps major who made a very small splash in the Marine Corps news when he said, I'm retiring. And he was like a year or two shy of full retirement. He's like, I can't in good conscience salute that man or have anything to do with it. I think he's a moral reprobate. And this is before the Lewinsky scandal. He just like, from everything I hear coming out of Arkansas, I can't serve under him in good conscience. I can't lead Marines with him being the commander. So I'm going to resign and go shovel shit or do whatever, And that guy actually was kind of famous in Marine Corps lore. During the Battle of Beirut, he jumped on Israeli tanks and stuck a 45 to the head of the Israeli when they were coming in there to just kill a bunch of folks. He's like, turn the damn tank around or you're dead right here.
Not today, huh? Your tank may go through, but you won't.
Mm-hmm, exactly. But that's the kind of guy he was, man. And that's the honorable thing to do. Fall on your sword, but because to do it any way else would be wrong.
And frankly, I think there's a way to do that. There's a way you can fall on your sword and do it the right way. And I think we've seen some people that, either did it poorly or the immediate aftermath was very poorly done. do you recall the Marine Lieutenant Colonel here a couple of years ago that made quite the splash that he went out and his original, shot across the bow, if you will, it was him walking out the door. I was like, okay, well, that was loud, but all right. But then his aftermath, I think he handled that poorly after that.
Yeah, he works for Hegseth now. Did you know that?
That doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. They seem to have a pattern of hiring the disgruntled and the upset. And
well, he had a point. The way he went about it was absolutely wrong. I mean, as a matter of fact, one of my former COs, when he was a major, he was the major general who was giving commands to this guy. His name was Stu something, Lieutenant Colonel. And oh man, they got in a big row over, hey man, shut your mouth. I'm gonna confine you to base as a Lieutenant Colonel. Yeah. Rudy says, concur with TC. Your opinions are irrelevant. You are there to accomplish a mission, which includes following the order of those legally appointed over you. That's all I've gotten until I get another cup of coffee. And Michael Gentili has an interesting thing. He says, same process in the private sector. If you can't support the enterprise mission, move on.
No, it's true. It's just a general life point that if you take the man's salt, you take the man's money, or the woman, I mean, generically speaking, then you keep your mouth shut. You salute the flag. You do what's, and if you don't want to obey that regulation, that rule, that's fine. Go elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then run your suck all you want. But, and like Joe Roy brought up a good point earlier, is that the commandant of the Coast Guard got clobbered here. And she was the first one out the gate, I believe.
She was, I believe, yeah.
And Joe, of course, is a good friend of mine. He's also a retired Coastie, which, like being a retired Marine, there's just no cure for that.
No, there's not. My brother's a retired Coast Guard. Gregory says Battle Griffin was nothing compared to Fort McCoy. Yeah, that's what I hear. Greg. Brutal, man. And Alan reminds us, respect the office, maybe not the person. And that's the same thing for, you saluting the rank, not the person, man. And if you can't do that, time to find another career.
Yeah. And, not for nothing, by the time you're a lieutenant colonel, you know that's not news. So for her to do something that deliberate, that's a statement. That's an intentional statement. That's not, oops, I screwed up.
No. And same thing for this Marine Lieutenant Colonel that went, in uniform from his office, which was just wrong on every level. And said, hey, man, and somebody needs to be held accountable for Afghanistan. And that's kind of one of the things I'm waiting for. I'm glad we're doing tariffs and all this other kind of stuff. And this is going to bleed into my next point here. All the crap talk coming out of Kash Patel. I don't know why we can't get the Jeffrey Epstein released the first day. It's what I'm going to do. And now you're like, I'm going to fight violent criminals. That has nothing to do with what he alleged in the years running up to becoming the FBI director. And whether it's him or Christy Nome, and I'm not happy about Kash Patel. I think Christy is out there on the front lines, but I saw a picture of her this morning holding an M4, and I'm like, okay, what the hell is this? What are your thoughts?
To me, it smacks of a lot of cosplay. It really, and look, they may be well-intentioned, they may have a plan, but it's falling very, very flat. The picture of Miss Nome, that's gone viral largely because from the angle that the camera is presented, it looks as though she's pointing that M4 at the guy's head on her left, if we're talking about the same photo. Mm-hmm. And if you watch the video, he actually kind of notices and takes himself a nice, easy slide to the rear to kind of get the M4 out of his ear. Does that matter to the majority of Americans? No. Does it matter to people like us? Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it just feeds into that perception that these are not, people that are, comfortable in the realm that they have entered. Mm-hmm. They're playing a game in large part. Mr. Patel and Mr. Bongino have been shockingly silent since they got in to these positions. And not only external to the organization, but within the organization. I mean, these are the two key leadership positions in the FBI, and just a deafening silence. within the organization. Now, I talked about last week, Mr. Bongino came in and sent out an email, basically saying, I'm new here. I've got to learn the ropes. We're going to, execute the president's mission, et cetera, et cetera. But that's been it. And my personal opinion, and I have no insider information on any of this. As I've talked about before, my wife and I keep a very rigid Chinese wall about this sort of thing. But my personal opinion is both of these gentlemen had reputations for strong feelings around the FBI.
Mm-hmm.
They did not shy away from voicing, and in Mr. Patel's case, writing down in a book. Mr. Bongino on multiple occasions called for the dissolution of the FBI, indictments, wholesale indictments, firing everybody. The organization is to run its course, et cetera, et cetera. I think what has happened and what we predicted here on the show is that they've gotten in there, they've gotten into these positions, and their rhetoric got them the jobs. Their unflagging support of the president got them the jobs. I think they've gotten in there, and now they've been read into the Holy of Holies, right? Now they're seeing not what the media perception is, not what the external perception of the organization is. They're seeing what is actually being done that isn't broadcast to the world. And I think it's really, really served as a damper on both of them. I mean, one, they can't talk about a lot of the stuff that they're reading, but two, I think that they're seeing, hey, we said all these nasty things and the truth is perhaps more nuanced. I personally don't think it should change their goals. I think that their goals of rehabilitating the organizational reputation that's taken such a beating, and in part, they should own that beating. I mean, they helped beat the Bureau from their various positions over the years. But if you're going to rehabilitate that, you've got to act. You can't just show up at HRT in your Gucci gear and take happy snaps. You've got to do something. And both of them made such vociferous promises around these improvements, these corrections. I think that they need to execute on some of them, particularly since this president is doing such a good job of fulfilling, whether you agree or not, is a different conversation as far as where you agree with what he's doing. But he's doing a very good job of fulfilling the promises he made in his run-up. I would say so far, Mr. Patel is falling a little short on that. And I think that's a place he needs to make improvements if he wants to not lose this job like he lost the ATF gig.
Yeah, I couldn't be more disappointed. Not that I have great love and respect for the agents of the FBI. Absolutely. That. I think anybody that watches this show knows that. However, pause for effect. I think that the leadership, most senior leadership, have been politicized in ways that is unhealthy to the organization and its mission and its credibility. And I think the only way to restore that is to get some change agents in there. And I hoped that Mr. Patel and Mr. Bongino could have been that, but as of yet, I don't see it. And it's probably like you said, you get read in on the back end, and you're like, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that." And one of our mutual friends, Simon, is retiring this week. I don't know if you
Is he really?
Yeah.
Geez, he just went to the academy like last week. How the heck is he retiring already? Oh, my God. I literally remember when he went.
Yeah. I emailed with him last week, for a matter of fact.
Yeah, I reached out to him, still haven't heard back from him.
Okay. But yeah, I'm just really disappointed in that. I think some of the other things I see, and I want to go back to the Kristi Noem position. I think she's being a good cheerleader for her organization. She is out there. She's getting it done. My concern is this, and this is something I haven't heard anybody say, so I'll take credit for this one. The difference between a uniform and a costume is the man or woman inside of it. You say that again, because it's like you said, it's cosplay. Your costume plan. And my friends and yours have died with an M4 in their hand, and I don't, putting on all that kit and posing for a photo does not make you a soldier or Marine, an airman, an operator. You're just wearing a freaking costume, man. And I think most people that have walked the path that you and I and 99% of the folks watching this morning are kind of probably feel a little queasy about that. I know I do. I take some exception with that. If you want to be, I think you can be a cheerleader for your organization and still, not put on all the Gucci gear. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, look, if I were suddenly made the Secretary of the Navy and I showed up at Lejeune in a full Marine Corps battle dress uniform, yeah, right. Imagine that. They'd be like, "What the? Who the?" Yeah. But then you juxtapose that with, say, President Bush the Younger. He lands on an aircraft carrier and jumps out in a flight suit. Nobody bats an eye, right? They commented that, well, he shouldn't have this, he shouldn't have that. The truth of the matter is, the man was a pilot, right?
He was.
He flew. His dad.
And that's the only reason it passed the sniff test for me.
Right. Right. So, look, I think that my personal opinion is Ms. Noam and Mr. Patel would be better served if they showed up at these events in a suit looking like the chief executive of these organizations, because they're not fooling anybody. Ms. Noam, you're not kicking a door. Putting on a ballistic vest and picking up an M4 makes you more akin to a tin plate dictator than it does to a serious leader of a serious organization. And that may be my hidebound old man opinion. I'm certainly willing to take the hit for that. But I just, for those of us, as Mr. Kelly points out, those of us on our side of this fence, it doesn't look good. Perhaps it does to the great unwashed. And we have to remember, we're a very small percentage of the electorate, very small. Yeah. So maybe it plays, but it leaves me, less impressed. And
I was fine with the ball cap and the windbreaker and stuff like that. I mean, but it just seems to be like escalating. Like,
And look, I'm the first to admit, I did 20 years in the FBI. You're the director of the FBI, or you're the deputy director of the FBI. You shave, or you have a full beard. I could live with the full beard. Shave your face. Your official photo shouldn't look like you just came back from a weekend bender, threw a suit on, and got in front of a camera.
Who is this?
Well, if you look at the official photos for both Mr. Bongino and Mr. Patel, they're unshaven. They've got
really
3 days of stubble. Oh yeah,
I'll have to check that out.
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Bongino sent an email out recently or an email or a Twitter or I don't know, whatever, it was something on social media, but it had his photo with it. Same thing, hadn't shaved in several days, had more hair on his face than on his head. And I get it. Look, that's the fashion nowadays. I understand that. However, period, however you want to put this, the FBI is a lot of things, and a conservative organization is one of them. And you need to look the part. You need to look professional, because it's not just the American electorate that you're presenting yourself to, right? I mean, I wandered around in foreign countries, and people heard FBI and knew what it was, thought they knew what it was, had a perception of it. Your job is to husband that, is to, grow it and take care of it, because you don't own it, right? You're just wearing it for a little while, and you're going to pass it on to the next person.
Hopefully better than you found it.
Hopefully better than you found it, right? So, and again, as I said, I'm fully willing to admit this might just be my proclivities, my hidebound status as an old frumpy FBI agent. When Mr. Comey took over, and I fully understand your position on Mr. Comey. One of the first things he did is he showed up his first day not wearing a white shirt, and people were aghast and agog, because Mr. Mueller, I don't believe he ever wore anything but white shirts while he was in that office. And so that was seen as a loosening of the dress code. Now we can wear colored shirts.
Like you are today, Dr.
Like I am today. Like I steadfastly do. I'll throw a white shirt on every now and then. But, I like to experience the full palette.
I love it. It's just lovely. Tony says, kind of like those unelected black Rome political activists cosplaying as district trial court judges. Boy, well said, my friend. And I tell you, that is, if the president has to get over the hurdle of, was it 700 and something federal court judges in order to get any of his policy enacted, we're done. I mean, we are smoked. It's impossible.
Right. Well, and we've talked about on the show previously that because of the way our government has developed over the last few decades, I am of the opinion our judiciary is overpowered. There's just legislation from the bench has become the norm and not the exception. And I understand it. I mean, our legislature bodies are just frozen, right? I mean, they're absolutely frozen. Of course, I always come back to the budget. I beat on this a lot. They haven't passed a budget in decades. Decades. You got one job, Carl. And they seem to perceive that job as get reelected, not pass the budget. And so, of course, decisions aren't being made in the legislature. Well, who's that leave it to? It leaves it to the executive and the judiciary. And the judiciary has been creeping up in power over. It's a slow boil with them, so people are not really noticing it as much. I think Mr. Trump is seizing a big part of that vacuum now as well, and people are noticing that.
Rudy's point is kind of what we were talking about a moment ago. He says the quickest way to lose support of the people around you is to wear a uniform you haven't earned. I saw it several times in my career, and it quickly forms a lasting negative impression. That's absolutely correct.
And in an extreme case of that, you remember Admiral Borda. You were in when that happened. I'm sure Rudy was in when that happened. For those that don't recall, he was the chief of naval operations, correct?
Yep. He made it from seaman all the way to the 4-star admiral in charge of it.
And was caught wearing some medals he hadn't been awarded and resigned in disgrace and then killed himself. Or did he kill himself before he resigned?
I think he killed himself.
Yeah. That was a big stink when that happened.
You don't have CNOs commit suicide. I mean,
that's not generally speaking. Usually that's not a common, you don't often see them joining the 22 a day.
No, but and I may have told you, may not have. I won't say the gentleman's name here. I was the district training team, so I led a mobile training team, and had a new major come in and replace me. We passed the flag. He takes over, and about 6 weeks later, the colonel calls me into his office and says, the major's been read his rights. He's being relieved, and I need you to go back to leading the training team. And I'm like, oh God. I will give this gentleman one thing. He came to my house that night and apologized to my wife in person that, because it put me back on the road and I was burned out of traveling every week. But what he had done was, it's a very similar thing. The colonel saw him out somewhere and said, he looked at the XO and he's like, Dave, I don't remember giving him a Bronze Star or Purple Heart to you.
Ooh.
When he checked in here 6 weeks ago, he didn't have that stuff.
Oh.
Yeah. So, you just don't see that with a former enlisted guy who rose all the way to major, I think was in the zone for lieutenant colonel, a very storied, he was dual cool Marine, force reconnaissance guy, did some NATO special ops stuff legitimately. And that's where he came to us from. And I don't know what the hell possessed him to do it, but he was court-martialed and told to go away.
Yeah, we had the master sergeant that was in charge of training when I was in ROTC. Every ROTC detachment has a certain roster of ranks, and one of the head trainer was a master sergeant in our office. And he got caught doing the same thing. And it was I think various jump wings from different countries and possibly even a Ranger tab. I don't remember, but it was fairly significant. And I think he retired just as the hammer was falling. So
yeah, there must be some sort of mental illness involved and stuff like that. But Rudy says Admiral Borda's suicide had a profound impact on his junior officer corps. Yeah, because as I understand it, the guy was charismatic, well-liked, well-respected by everybody. And if I remember correctly, it was a matter of, it wasn't that he didn't earn the Navy achievement, the Navy comm. It was that he was wearing Valor devices on both of them. I could be wrong on that, but that's a no-no.
Yeah.
And somebody else got in trouble for that reason. I think it was Tim Kennedy. He got a Bronze Star, and the Army tends to do Bronze Stars as a
participation trophy.
Yeah, exactly. During the GWAP, man, they were giving those things out like candy, just without a valorous device. So it was like, a good conduct medal for combat. Of course, the Marine Corps does not do that. I never saw a Marine who had a Bronze Star without a V on it. It's just like, we don't do that. Yeah. And Tim Kennedy was taking the accolades for having a Bronze Star with bravery. As I understand it, Tim, we've had him on the show. And it didn't, and the community just kind of tore his ass apart.
Sure. It's funny how that award has evolved, because my ex-wife's grandfather had 2 Bronze Stars from World War II.
Mm-hmm.
He got one in the 4th Wave at Omaha Beach and one at Bastogne. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can see giving Bronze Stars
Mhm.
for those. And then I remember in the Gulf War, 1st Infantry Division, every E5 and above got a Bronze Star.
Oh, God.
And then I was over in the 8th Infantry Division. They're like, no, what did you
No.
do? No? Oh, all right then. Back of the line, pal.
Yeah.
And you know, look, that sounds like sour grapes, and you're like, oh, no big deal. But the reality is, it impacted my soldiers' promotion rates
Mm-hmm.
because now they're not as competitive as the guys that were in the first ID.
Sure.
And to me, that was, you know, it was less of an impact on the officer corps, but it was really unfair, I thought. But you know,
I had been, this is crazy, but as a Lance Corporal, an E3, I held an officer's billet during the Gulf War as the mortar rep to the colonel's fire support team. So it's supposed to be the 81 millimeter mortar platoon commander, but for whatever reason, the company commander wanted your old pal, Rich Brown. So after that, I got real, I became the colonel's driver, so we're going to division awards, and I'm sitting there watching these senior officers decide on who's going to get what at the division level. So you got the division chief of staff and everybody around the table. And I mean, the Marine Corps is ruthless. I wish I had that on tape. It's like, okay, the next one is going to be a Bronze Star for HM3 Smith, Navy corpsman attached to this unit. Here's the write-up from everybody. There's endorsements from everybody. And he ran across a minefield under fire to pick up a wounded Marine sergeant who weighed 230 pounds. He carried him back through the minefield, back under fire, threw him on the Humvee of a truck and treated his wounds and got him a medevac and da-da-da-da-da. And it's just, and I remember like my company commander's like, and we're going to give him a what? A Bronze Star. He's like, for doing his job? Hell no. Did he get paid? Seriously, sir, did he get paid? And everybody's like, yeah, he got paid. Okay, great. What are we talking about here? Next. And I'm like, that's the Marine Corps, brother. You want to understand the Marine Corps? That's it.
I had, when I was put in for the Soldier's Medal, I remember conversations I had with my buddies. I was like, it's really flattering to get put in for it, but I fully expected exactly what you said. I said, I'll never see that thing. It's going to disappear into the bureaucratic morass, and that'll be the end of that. Because someone somewhere is going to say, absolutely not. And frankly, I didn't feel like, at the time, I was like, well, of course. Who else is going to do it, right?
Right.
Then a year later, I get that call. Did I ever tell you the story about the call that I got?
No.
Oh, really? If you got a moment.
Absolutely. I'm all ears.
All right. So I know this thing is out there, and I've left Egypt, and I'm back at Fort Bragg. I'm commanding the 18th EOD. At the time, it was the 18th EOD. I think it's reflagged to something else now. And just happily humming along in my life. I've applied to the bureau, but we'll see what happens. And I get a phone call. And hey, is this Captain Fuller? I said, yeah, absolutely. Who's this? And he said, well, this is Specialist Brown. Mm-hmm. How can I help you, Specialist Brown? Oh, sir, I'm up at G1 up at Corps, and because 18th Airborne Corps was and I think still is headquartered at Fort Bragg, and they were obviously echelons above my reality. So how can I help you, Specialist? What can the 18th EOD do for you?
That's right.
He says, well, sir, he says, I've got a Soldier's Medal award here for you. And it's back from Department of the Army. It's signed, and General Keene, who's the 4-star 18th Airborne Corps commander at the time, he'd like to know when you're available for him to present it. And I was like, Specialist, what building are you in? He's like, I'm in building XYZ 123, sir. It's all right. I can be there in 20 minutes. You hang on to that award. I'll come and get it from you. He's like, sir? I said, look, this is just between you and me. I'll just come up, pick up the award, and we'll be, we'll just take care of it. Okay. Sir, I don't think I can do it. I said, Specialist, I'll give you $100. and now he's like, hold on a minute, sir. Let's be on hold. I'm like, all right. Maybe he's figuring out when chow is or something. I can slide up there, and phone comes back up. Sergeant Major Wilson. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah, here we go. The gig is up.
And the next thing I hear is, hello, sir. I'm like, hello, Sergeant Major. He's like, you're scaring my specialist, sir. Hey, Sergeant Major, let's just can we do this quiet? I can come up and snag that up. He's like, oh no, sir, absolutely not. He says, we don't get a lot of these awards, and we certainly don't give them to officers very much. No, sir, we're gonna have a thing. The whole dog and pony show. I'm like, come on, Sergeant Major. help me out here. He's like, oh, it's going to be great, sir. We're going to have generals and we're going to have colonels and oh, it'll be fun. You've got to invite your wife. I'm like, oh, damn, come on, man. And that's exactly what happened. Local news media, the whole nine. I'm like, God bless it.
Well, good. I mean, that's what, in all reality, that's the way it should be, because again, you got to water the performance you want to grow. And I truly believe that. So something like that. I remember Seaclander, his only Navy Achievement Medal he got he was on a JTF and Southern California Drug Task Force as an intel guy. And he was rolling around in a rental car and got T-boned, and he ended up pulling the other driver out while the car was on fire. Blah, 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 got burned, and he got a Navy Achievement Medal, which is the lowest you can get. Oh, yeah. Marine Corps ain't giving you a damn Navy Marine Corps. Oh, hell no.
He risked his life in a peacetime environment. That meets the threshold for at least putting him in for a soldier. It gets a Navy and Marine Corps medal or Marine Corps medal.
Yeah. Absolutely. Mark says, I love Dr. Fuller's experience in the military. Don't we all?
It had its moments. I mean, it's, from 25 years distance, it's quite funny. But,
yeah. So, you mentioned, and I think Jared is on. He says, I'll catch it the replay. Got to go catch fox snares. Been harassing our chickens and ducks, and Jared's up there in Montana, man. That's some good stuff. That's American right there. Jared's got to go catch fox snares in Montana. That sounds like a good time. You were talking about the budget issues with Congress not doing their job. I think that's something that Tony was talking about. And, budget issues is one of the things that leads to a civil war. And the only reason I bring this up is over the weekend we had the governor of Pennsylvania's house was firebombed and arsonists hit it. We're seeing Tesla dealerships bombed and things of this nature. It's a big threshold to cross, but again, this internal strife is it's going somewhere. I don't know where. I hope somewhere good. I can't imagine, but who knows?
Yeah, and it was interesting because there are some people with very strong opinions, many of them watch this show, about the last president, but I don't recall that sort of level of violence that we're starting to see now, or that we saw in President Trump's first term. And I don't know if it's simply because of Trump derangement syndrome, people hate Trump in particular, or if it's a feature, not a bug of the left. They seem, it's odd to me because it seems to me, and this I'm painting with a very broad brush here, it seems to me the people on the right tend to attract a lot more military personnel, a lot more law enforcement personnel, a lot more people with actual experience in and around violence. And the left doesn't. And yet the left oftentimes seems more prone to actually crossing that line into violence. And I fully understand I'm painting with a very broad brush. There are massive exceptions on both ends of this spectrum and to what I'm actually saying. But that is just sort of a general observation I make that, we see violence and it tends to come from the left. Now, January 6th, granted, huge exception to what I'm saying. But you had January 6th, and I'm not making excuses here.
What if there were professional agitators in there that were leading the
charge?
Not that there isn't on the left. I'm sure it goes both ways.
Yeah. Well, you have to wonder. And what was it? Rush Limbaugh used to call it rent-a-mob. The same people would show up for all kinds of different protests of various different things simply because they thought they might have a chance to throw a brick or throw a punch.
Yeah.
But I don't think you're going to see a massive civil war outbreak in the United States until and unless the soldiers stop getting paid. That's, if you look at the Bolshevik Revolution 100 years ago in Russia, everything was going along. People were pretty pissed off at the Tsar, but he still had ironclad control of things until he stopped paying the military.
Yeah.
Then they jumped ship, and that was the end of that.
I think the same thing with the fall of the Soviet Union, was it not?
Yeah.
Something very akin to that.
Yeah. Happily, it didn't result in people shooting each other much.
Yeah, well, that's debatable.
But
here's what I wanted, and that you mentioned the left, and there's a White House photo of Governor Whitmer covering her face. Did you see that?
No, I missed that one.
Oh my God, man. And you have the activist governor of Maine not complying over the keeping men out of women's sports. So they're going to cut her funding off, and Governor Whitmer doing something very childish, covering her face because she didn't want her constituents seeing that she was actually in the Oval Office trying to make a deal with the sitting president. I mean, this is insanity, man.
Yeah. And it goes back to, you remember Nancy Pelosi ripping her copy of the State of the Union in half?
I guess now that I'm connecting some dots here, we have an activist female colonel in Greenland. We have the admiral female first commandant gets smoked. We have Whitmer and the governor of Maine. Forgive me, I can't remember her name. I see a lot of left-leaning females that are really putting their opinions before their office.
Yeah. Well, hell hath no fury. There's something to be said for that. So, yeah. And, say what you will about Mr. Trump, he has a lifetime of pissing off women behind him. So I don't know if that has anything to do with now, but correlation doesn't prove causation, but it does draw the eye. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, man. It just seems like a very odd time that we're living in.
Yeah, it is. And again, Trump came into the 47th with the first female chief of staff. Mm-hmm. And that was mentioned by no one. And he has a long history of appointing females. I mean, in his book, he talks about he put a female in charge of one of the skyscrapers he did. And it was unheard of, that a female would be, she was like in her 20s. Wow. And she brought it in on time, under budget, and it's like it had never been done before in New York. That a woman can't do that in New York. Get contractors and teamsters and iron workers to do it. Yeah. So I think a lot of that's unfounded. It's just part of the
rep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and he's interesting because he does make these appointments around him that other politicians would seem to be screaming, right in front of be on every news media they could find to scream what a great guy they are, because they put a polka dotted transgender, turtle in charge of something. And look how progressive I am. Look how great I am. He just seems to do it and move on, because my perception, and it could be skewed, but my perception is just looking for the best person he can find. And
yeah,
once he gets that, he drops him in there and moves out.
Somebody said something very akin to that, Dr. Fuller, that from his first term, they're like, he was getting all this hate. I think it was over moving the American embassy to Jerusalem. And said most politicians would just be devastated and they got to figure out what to do. And he was just like, next. And they're like, holy cow. Yeah, he just didn't care. What else is on the agenda?
Yeah, and we can debate how he defines the best person, because I don't think he's always putting in the best person for the job per se, as opposed to whom he perceives as the best by his own rubric. Now, that may be loyalty, that may be whatever it is. But he doesn't seem to belabor the point. He doesn't crow about it one way or the other. So, like, let's take Mr. Patel. You don't see Mr. Trump on the news talking about, hey, I found a first, Indian American, a first Asian American in charge of the FBI. It's never been done before. I did that. That's me. What a great guy I am. You don't hear him say that. He's like, that's the guy. Let's go do something else. Mm-hmm. So,
same thing with his immigration stuff. It's like his mother was an immigrant. He's married to immigrants. I mean, to think that he's, I don't know. Again, I'm not being an apologist. I think that, and to your point about it's his own rubric as to what, I think we would all agree with that. I mean, I've made reference before. I would go through a door with you before I'd go through a door with the DevGru operator, because I have a high amount of trust for you. Now, you also have skills and abilities, maybe not to the DevGru operator level, obviously, but at the same time, it's like, if I had to choose between a career pilot, Mike Pompeo, or you to lead the FBI, it's you every day of the week. So I think in fairness, we would all probably be that way.
You like to hope. So it is what it is in DC. And just hope that, I guess really what it boils down to is you hope that the person you put in charge of something is going to perform. Mm-hmm. And Trump doesn't seem to have a problem with canning people that he doesn't find performing to the standard he wants to see. So we'll see what
As
happens.
it should
here.
be. I mean, Lincoln did the same thing. How many generals did he fire before he got to Grant?
Yeah.
Fired and rehired McClellan 3-4 times. I mean, it's insane.
Well, you know, you look at the Germans in World War II; they did that constantly. I mean, and von Manteuffel got canned and rehired over and over and over again. So I guess it's not unheard of. It's just maybe unheard of for those who don't study history.
Sure, it's a good point. Last thing I wanted to talk to you about is Iran. It seems to be coming to the table now, but I would ask: are they coming to the table now because we've got most of our B-2 stealth bomber fleet in Diego Garcia, and we've got 2 aircraft carriers off the coast? I mean, is that what's bringing them to the table now, or what?
Carrot and stick, right? I mean, we've talked about it before. Trump is a deal maker, and he, unlike a lot of his predecessors, seems to be willing to use the stick and the carrot, whether that's an economic stick or a force stick. And in the case of the Iranians, they understand force, right? That's the coin they choose to deal in. And he's okay with that. I mean, we send 2 of our aircraft carriers over there. What's that? Less than 20% of our aircraft carriers? And either one of them could glass that whole country all by itself, let alone 2 of them.
Right.
And, let's not forget that when an aircraft carrier shows up, it doesn't come alone, right? I mean, it brings the heat. A carrier battle group is no freaking joke. And to park 2 of them around there, and I don't know, for me, that says something that you're willing to put aircraft carrier groups in that small a space. I mean, they're designed to, take over chunks of the Atlantic and the Pacific. And you put them in, and I realize I'm singing to the choir telling you this, but you put them in that kind of a confined space, that's like asking the Hulk to open a pickle jar. So yeah, that's a definite statement. And you don't have to say anything, you just have to park them there. Everybody knows, let other people talk about it. And you can walk down into the diplomatic space with a smile on your face and the hand outstretched. Hey, let's talk, let's be friends, because your Rottweilers are parked out front. And look, if we're not actually shooting people in the face, I'm fine with that. Park them over there. That's why we've got them. Let them know, yes, you are a regional power, Iran. Good for you.
Yeah,
that's adorable. That's adorable, right? It's a lot like when I would show up at national shooting competitions. I was cool beans locally and even in the state, right? I show up at the national level and I'm like polishing my 10th place trophy with a smile on my face. Hey, so that's kind of Iran, right? They're big bad dudes when they're shoving Syria and Yemen around. But welcome to the bigs, buddy. So, and maybe that's part of what they want, right? It's just like North Korea. What they want is they want the U.S. to sit down with them. They want to be such a pain in the ass that the U.S. has to deal with them because that raises their profile, right? It's not like Yemen is bringing us to the table. We're not parking a aircraft carrier group in the Mediterranean because of Syria.
All right.
So, there is some way of looking at this that's just kind of an Iranian win, right? I mean, how many times has North Korea brought us to the table by rattling sabers and then gotten something out of the deal, if only a conversation?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that when I see the battle group out there, again, having been part of one, MARG, Marine Air Ground Task Force, I mean, you've got the entire MARG task force and a carrier group. I mean, you have not just the air power that can project, you've got, a Marine Expeditionary Unit as part of the tail. And with that comes MPF ships. And most Americans have no idea that we have MPF ships, which is maritime prepositioning of force ships. So this is a giant fleet of ships, and all they got is tanks, bombs, bullets, beans, band-aids, everything you need to sustain fuel, everything you need to sustain combat operations for up to 30 days. And I would be more scared if I saw a carrier group, a MARG, and MPF ships out there. Like, oh shit, they're ready to, they're positioning for a sustained fight.
Yeah, it was when I was in Germany, they were shutting down a lot of things. Germany had reunified, and I helped close up the 11th Armored Cav.
Hmm.
And they had very cutting edge gear at the 11th ACR because they were sitting in the Fulda Gap, which was, a very strategic place in Germany, and largely believe that would be where the Russian spearhead would thrust through. So they had, all the cutting edge stuff. Well, all of a sudden they're in the middle of Germany. Fulda Gap isn't a critical place anymore. So they took all that gear and they put them on ships.
Mm-hmm.
At the time we had POMCUS sites. You might remember these things where you had big warehouses around Europe that's where the tanks were. And that's where the Humvees were. And that's where the fuel and the beans, the bombs, the bullets, that they were all stationed in these POMCUS sites. So that the idea being that, okay, the war has started, we got to get in this fight because the Russians are coming. Rather than ship all that stuff from Kansas, you just put the, 1st Infantry Division on planes and bang, 2 days later, they're all there and they fall in on the gear that's already on site.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to ship it to a port. You don't have to put it on a boat, sail the boat across. And, oh, by the way, that whole time you're at risk of getting shot up and sunk and disrupted, delayed, weather, et cetera, et cetera. So they started moving the POMCUS sites out of Europe and putting them on boats. And that's where you get your MPF. And the Army has their equivalent as well, because it just speeds things up, because it's a lot easier to move the people than it is to move a tank.
Oh, yeah. They put you on a charter flight and you're there 12 hours or what have you. Yeah. Well, Dr. Fuller, I've kept you on here almost. I know you have a hard out, sir. Anything that you think that you're watching that we didn't kind of touch on today?
No, I think we touched on a lot of stuff. We could have done a much deeper dive on a few of the things, but time limits being what they are and the constraints that we have to live with. But there's always another week.
That's right. Yes, there is. Well, Dr. Fuller, why don't you take us out, sir?
Well, as we always say, the fight is coming. And I'd like to think this show helps you in the process of becoming ready.